Good evening to those of you joining us here in person at the Begin Center in Jerusalem, and good evening or good afternoon to those watching on Zoom, wherever you are in the world. We always have a nice international audience watching us virtually. My name is Paul Gross. I'm a senior fellow here at the Begin Center. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to another of our English language programs here. I'm especially happy that we're here to launch the new book of a good friend of the Center, a good friend of mine, Kalev. His book is The Assault on Judaism, available on Amazon and also here after the event, for those of you here. This book looks at the subtitle is The Existential Threat is Coming from the West. It's already made quite a splash. It's already an Amazon bestseller and was chosen as the cover for a recent edition of the Jerusalem Report. It's a follow-up to Gal's previous book, Judaism 3.0, Judaism's Transformation to Zionism, which argues that Zionism has become the anchor of Judaism, and that therefore, or one of the aspects of that is that anti-Zionism and Israel bashing have become the principal way in which Judaism and Jews are attacked today in the world. And some of you will know that we have a series of events here at the Begin Center related to different aspects of Gal's thesis. We brought in a lot of top speakers, some of whom agreed more or less with Gal, some of whom didn't, and there was a lot of nice back and forth, and I give Gal a lot of credit, and he's always happy to be challenged and disagreed with. Just over a year ago, we had one such debate here, which focused on the claim in Gal's first book that anti-Zionism is an existential threat to the survival of Judaism. And in that event, Gal outlined a theoretical path to the destruction of Judaism, as he saw it, which involves sanctions and delegitimization and demonization of Israel coming from the West. And then 3 weeks later, we had October 7th, and we've seen many of these predictions come true, unfortunately. I mean, it might be good for the sales of Gal's book, but still, unfortunately. Over the summer, Gal published a new edition of Judaism 3.0, which was updated to include events of the last year. And we're delighted to be launching his new book, The Assault on Judaism, which analyzes the events of the last year in the Western media, in international organizations, in Western governments, in global public opinion, and shows how these events amount, according to Gal, to the greatest survival challenge for the Jewish nation in the last 2,000 years. He shows how this Western assault on Judaism is also becoming a threat to US national security and offers creative new solutions to counter this assault. So we'll hear more from Gal on this, and you can also, of course, ask him more and challenge him in questions later. The book has been lauded by a number of significant voices, including the editor of Newsweek, Josh Hammer, who called it a must-read, Colonel Richard Kemp, who I'm sure is known to many of us, a very good friend of Israel, former commander of British forces in Afghanistan and Iraq, who described it as groundbreaking and brilliant. And tonight we are very fortunate to have another highly influential and brilliant thinker herself, Melanie Phillips, the renowned columnist with the Times of London. I'll introduce her properly a little later in the evening. First, I'm going to introduce Gal, the book's author. Gal is a columnist for the Jerusalem Post. He's the author, as I said, of Judaism 3.0, Judaism's Transformation to Zionism, and he's also chair of the Judaism 3.0 think tank. He's an avid scholar of Theodor Herzl. We did an event here a year and a half ago about applying Herzl's framework to today's issues. For about 2 decades, Gal lived in New York, where he was a Wall Street investment banker, advising financial instigation in the US and Europe, and mergers and acquisitions, working in Citigroup and then JP Morgan. He's a native of Tel Aviv, has served in the Israeli army, and contrary to the popular trend, has done the opposite move to many people, has moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And he lives now in Jerusalem with his wife Tamara, who's also here with us tonight. Gal, floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Paul. Hello, everybody. I'm honored to be back here at the Begin Center for the launch of my new book, as Paul said, The Assault on Judaism. Thank you all for coming, which is completely not intuitive given the security situation. And thank you, everybody who's joining by Zoom and on the live broadcast around the world. And I look forward, Melanie, to having an interesting conversation with you later in the evening. As Paul mentioned, I was here at this podium just over a year ago, in September 2023. It was a different world back then, the world of yesterday, to use the phrase. Since then, we had October 7th. We're fighting a war for our survival. We've lost hundreds of soldiers and civilians. We have over 100 hostages in Gaza. We have communities in Israel displaced. We have families whose fathers and husbands has been in the military for months. We are really fighting a war, a physical war for our survival, and we will win. Now, as we see almost every day, Iran and its proxies have the capabilities to kill Jews, to kill many Jews. Sadly, we've noticed that today. But Iran does not have the capabilities to destroy Judaism. Those capabilities are housed in the West. And as Paul mentioned, when I was here a year ago, and I outlined a theoretical path to the destruction of Judaism that involved elements and actions of the West, sanctions, or investigations by the ICC, sanctions by various Western countries, demoralization, attempt to instill Jewish insecurity, an economic siege of Jerusalem. That was all in theory a year ago when we were here in September 2023. Then October 7th happened, and this is no longer in theory. The destruction mechanism of Judaism has been activated, and we're now well advanced in a well-funded attempt to negate the idea of the Jewish state, and through that, to negate the idea of Judaism. And as I describe in the book, this assault on Judaism that's coming from the West is not just a threat to the Jewish state and to the survival of Judaism, it is also a strategic threat to US national security and to global stability. And still, this threat has not been, it's all but been ignored. People are not focusing on this threat. And this is one of the main reasons why I have this book, to try to refocus the world public opinion to this existential threat. Now, things I discuss about are discussed in context of anti-Semitism, discussed in context of media bias, discussed in political context, in election context, but not in a strategic existential context. And I understand that. I understand why people do not want to talk about, an existential threat to Judaism that is coming from, polite Europeans wearing suits that we were kind of friends with in Europe. We can't talk about that when we have an active war, when we have Jews being killed, when we have missiles coming in. I completely understand why there is no focus on the assault on Judaism that's coming from the West. And people can say, you know what, let us fight the physical war. It's live, it's happening right now. And later, in a few years, when we survive the physical war, we can address the ideological assault that's coming from the West. Well, in a few years, it's going to be too late. As I describe in the book, the trajectory that was set on October 7th, and what we've been seeing over the last year is advancing rapidly in multiple fronts. month after month we have new ideas and new initiatives that's coming from the West. And this threat is simply not something that can be ignored. In the book, I delve into the nuances and intricacies of this threat. I try to understand it, and I learned from Theodor Herzl at his time, try to understand anti-Semitism from the anti-Semite point of view. Some of his friends were anti-Semites. Anti-Semitism was a new thing at his time, and nobody at his time thought it was a threat to the survival of Judaism. It was just, a political view. So I try in the book to explain and understand, using my background, how the media basically over the last year created a reality where the large portion of the global population is once again were incited against the Jews. I try to explain how governments, eventually friendly governments that are pro-Israel, that help us in the physical defense against the assault on Judaism, had to turn against us, had to partake in the ideological assault on Judaism, first in rhetoric and then in action. And I try to understand that the threat, the assault on Judaism from the West is coming not from bad people that are, they're also coming from friends, including my own friends. I try to have us all understand the complexities and the depth and the nuances of this assault on Judaism that's coming from the West. Because only if we understand that, then we can develop tools to counter it and to focus on it. And as I mentioned, something that we've not done at all so far for understandable reasons. I also compare the threat to previous threats, to last century's threat, last century attempt to eradicate Judaism, and previous ones, and try to place it in the global geopolitical context. There's a motto in Israel that says, in every generation, somebody rises up to eradicate us. B'kol dor v'dor omdim aleinu l'chalotenu. And I think it's very clear to Israelis and people around the world that every generation is now. There is a physical assault on Judaism, and there's an ideological assault on Judaism. But it is important to understand the path to destroy Judaism, the ability to eradicate Judaism, is the ideological path. Now, I've talked about this ideological path for a decade, as Paul mentioned, about how Israel bashing and anti-Zionism is an existential threat to Judaism, but it was all theoretical. October 7th and what happened after that changed everything, because war crimes indictments need a war. You can't have a war crime indictment if there's no war. So this path to destroy Judaism was all theoretical. Now it's not, because we have a war, and we can have people telling us that we're committing war crimes, that we're once again dehumanizing Europeans or Palestinians or whoever it is that we're dehumanizing. Lecture us that it's not just how we a right to defend ourselves, but it's how we defend ourselves. And this was the same in previous attempts. In the Middle Ages, some British wanted to keep the Jews out of England. They wanted to accuse the Jews for using the blood of Christian children to make Passover matzahs. But in order to have that, you need to have dead Christian children. So when there were a plague and diseases, then that could trigger a process to accuse Jews for using the blood of Christian children to make matzahs. And those accusations eventually, through a long process, led to the expulsion of Jews from England. England was Jew-free for centuries. Same with the Black Death. You could accuse Jews of deliberate starvation of European, but in order to accuse Jews of doing that, of polluting the wells, you need to have a Black Death, you need to have an epidemic, you need to have a pandemic. And it was the Black Death. So just like now, all this that was theoretical now became a reality. War crimes need a war, there's a war, and now we're far down the path, as I mentioned, of an attempt to eradicate Judaism through this ideological assault on Judaism. Well, we're here safe in Jerusalem, and we are safe here in Jerusalem. In Europe, the ground is being prepared for, once again, the mass arrest of Jews, of Israeli Jews. On May 19th, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court filed requests for the arrests of the leader of the Jewish state, Benjamin Netanyahu, and his defense minister, Yoav Gallant. Something that is astonishing. But he also, in the same request for indictment, prepared the ground and the basis and the frameworks for the arrest of all Israeli soldiers that he accused are participating in a collective crime, which is once again the starvation of the Palestinian population. It's not the starvation of the European population, it's the starvation of the Palestinian population. When I spoke here last year, somebody said, well, I mean, if this would happen, you know, Europe will sanction the ICC, and then the Netherlands will kick them out. The US will sanction the ICC. Well, they didn't. And the ICC continues over the summer until today to develop this infrastructure for the arrest of Israeli Jews. The ICJ, the International Criminal Justice, have joined them, and over the summer have prepared the groundwork for the arrest of settlers by taking some legal actions on that. And they both made it clear that it's not just soldiers and settlers, it's anybody that helps them. This is also over the last year became a concept, a principle. For example, in Canada, I discuss in the book the various assaults, the various fronts of the assault. In Canada, there was effectively sanctioning of the Jewish National Fund, an Israeli environmental organization. Why? Because their work, in theory, can benefit Israeli soldiers. Israeli soldiers can breathe fresh air and enjoy picnic tables and green trees. So, make no mistake, the ICC indictment or the preparation of ICC indictments are not just against Netanyahu and not against, you know, the head of the militaries or the head of it's against all Israeli Jews. And the Europeans says get out, and the Europeans say no. France immediately, the next day, pledges collaboration, which is astonishing. For the second time in 80 years, when the arrest warrants are issued against Jews, France pledged to collaborate with them. Now last time, 80 years ago in 1940s, in the previous attempt to eradicate Judaism, the French still today say, well, we have no choice. Germany invaded us. You know, we were under occupation. We couldn't do anything. The ICC did not invade France. France did that willingly. They pledged their collaboration and they weren't alone. Slovenia, Norway, other pledged the same. And nobody sanctioned the ICC, not even the United States. And as we said, as the summer progressed, those efforts have developed. President Macron of France, since then, further escalated last week. He connected the physical assault on Judaism with the ideological assault on Judaism. And as Israeli soldiers are fighting effectively for France, killing those terrorists that have murdered, the Hezbollah terrorists that have murdered hundreds of French soldiers, he has a new initiative to embargo the Jewish state. The war is a zero-sum game. He's effectively siding with Hamas and Hezbollah because the assault on Judaism is so strong and so popular and has such broad appeal in the masses after a year of incitement that we are seeing things like that. Now Macron's action is not only has an effect that, you know, well, we can get, you know, how are we going to fight Hezbollah if we're not going to have weapons? But it also solidifies the views of the Western public that there really is a problem here with the Jewish state. Because most people, don't do a PhD at the Israeli Gaza, the Israeli Lebanon, the Israeli Iran, the Israeli Yemen, the Israeli Iraq front. They trust their opinion leaders in the media, in Amnesty, in the UN, and their leaders, like Macron. So the fact that he has a position that the actions of the Jewish state are so malignant that they require an embargo in the middle of war instills the notion that, yes, there is a problem once again with the Jews, with the Jewish state. And it reawakens the Jewish question in Europe, a question that has been existing in various forms throughout the century. What do we do with those badly behaving Jews? And now the Jewish question manifests itself to the Jewish state. It's a Jewish state question. What do we do? What is the solution to the bad action of the Jews of the Jewish state? Now, we've spent time in the United States over the summer, and many American Jews said, well, I hear you, but what you're describing, you have to exact it. It's not an assault on Judaism, it's only assault on the Jews on that side of the ocean, right here. We American Jews are fine, which is cut and paste exactly the same thing that German Jews said in the 1930s, early 1930s. A lot of German Jews said, well, I mean, yeah, I get it. There's those Russian Jewish immigrants that are behaving in antisocial behavior that you see everywhere and are a problem. We agree. So this hatred towards them is not to us, proper German Jews of the Upper East Side of Berlin that served in the German army and served in World War I. It's against the Russian Jews. Same every other assault on Judaism that I describe in the book. For example, in the Inquisition time, the attempt in Spain in the 15th century to eradicate Judaism, there were those Jews who converted to Christianity and says, oh, this is not against us. We are now, new Christians. Only to discover that it's their actual conversion that put them under the jurisdiction of the Inquisition and allowed the attackers to continue with the attempted liquidation of the Jewish nation after they've converted to what was called then New Christians. The attempt to draw that distinction doesn't work. And I think more and more people in America, American Jews, understand that the assault on Judaism, the attempt to instill Jewish insecurity, not just through the action of the ICCs, but also through actions that are happening in the United States, affects them, whether they're in Pennsylvania, or whether in Arizona, or wherever they are in the United States. The assault on Judaism is an assault on American Jews, on the left and on the right, including those who bash Israel themselves. So I spent the first 2/3 of the book describing the assault on Judaism that we just gave a little flavor on, and the last third about offering some creative solutions that maybe we can talk in the panel. One of which is what we discussed exactly in this auditorium a year ago, when I said that the assault on Judaism is carried through a sword and a shield, and the shield is Judaism 2.0, the illusion that Judaism is merely a religion. Once there's a recognition that Judaism is transformed and Zionism has become the anchor of Judaism, you cannot hide behind this facade that you love the Jews and you hate the Jewish state. And as a few people have told me, and as I wrote in the updated version of the book Judaism 3.0, October 7th turned Judaism 3.0 from a thesis into a reality of day-to-day life, and you can ask any Jewish person on college campus about that. I also talk about bifurcated strategies on different people who are committing the assault on Judaism. There are the hardcore Israel bashers, those that you see in pro-Palestine demonstrations, who are the most passionate people who are assaulting Judaism from the West, but they don't have the destruction mechanisms. They are, on the other hand, what I call the Israel bashers light, who are not organic anti-Semites or anti-Zionists or normally people are my friends, but they are the one who have the destruction mechanism of Judaism. They are the one who activated them. Each need to have a different strategy, and I discuss that in the book. I also discuss specific immediate strategies that the United States can take to counter the assault on Judaism, because as I mentioned, the assault on Judaism is a proxy for the assault on America, an attempt to negate America's Judeo-Christian foundation, but also very practically, the ICC tried to sanction American troops in 2020. President Trump sanctioned the ICC. When ICC tried to indict and go after American troops, American President Trump levied very heavy sanctions on the prosecutor and their families. The U.S. can sanction the ICC because, Iran attacks Israel and the physical assault on Judaism in part because they attack Israel as little Satan, as a proxy for attacking America as big Satan. The ICC now indicts Israeli soldiers and political leaders as little war criminal, as a proxy for later indicting big war criminals, and they're making it no secret. They can just cut and paste the indictments. The South African foreign minister, amongst the leader of the assault on Judaism through the ICC, said it openly. America is next. So America can indict the prosecutors and employees of the ICC and those who collaborate with them, but they haven't done so yet. And another thing that of the many things I discuss in the book, is that the assault on Judaism should not be viewed as an issue of anti-Semitism. It should be reclassified as a U.S. national security issue. It should not be dealt by an anti-Semitic czar or committee or planting trees or writing textbooks. It should be dealt with on the National Security Council. And I will just end that with the notion that, I mentioned at the beginning that the motto that we say in Passover, that in every generation somebody rises up to eradicate us, has a second part of this verse. And Israelis know with 100% certainty that we will prevail. We will prevail against the physical assault on Judaism, and we will prevail in the ideological assault on Judaism. The question is, what would the world nations do? Never before has there been such a clear demarcation. The world's nation and individuals can either bless Israel or they can curse Israel. Over the last year, we saw a lot of people who chose to curse Israel, including world leaders, including opinion leaders, people in the media, people from the mainstream. But we also saw a lot of people, individuals who defy conventional wisdom, who refuse to adhere to the propaganda they hear from various Western news media and from their own Western leaders, and have chosen to bless Israel. And I hope that this book, The Assault on Judaism, can expand this coalition of people who choose to bless Israel from the right and from the left, from various political, religious, and national backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you very much.